Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
So, episode 9, the one we've all been waiting for. I honestly expected this week's episode to be based entirely on the Battle of the Bastards, but I was proved wrong. I'm happy Daenerys made an appearance in all honesty, because the battle would have been so excruciatingly long that I probably would have gotten bored. The battle on the wall between the Wildlings and the Night's Watch worked well in being an entire episode's length because of the massive build-up of conflict between the two parties from day one. This tension between reclaiming Winterfell hasn't exactly been around for that long, so it would have been foolish to create an hour-long episode of the battle, its preparations and aftermath. The episode opens at the Battle of Meereen, where we see a catapult slinging hellfire on the walls in an almost first-person perspective. This was intriguing at first, but then unfortunately fell apart in this shot here. I don't know why this shot was included. We have blokes catching fire and falling off the walls in the following shot. I couldn't help but laugh at it. I did, however, quite enjoy the section in Meereen this week, probably for the first time in the entire season, but it was great watching Tyrion trying to explain his way into victory as he always does. Emilia Clarke unfortunately plays the straight-faced, boringly dramatic Hollywood star, whilst Peter Dinklage seems to still be in character in this scene, and can be no better exemplified in this shot here, where one of the windows breaks in, or just simply watching their dialogue. It certainly was interesting watching the Dothraki fulfill their purpose of, well, arriving just in time, apparently. It was also great seeing Daario not as the leader of the charge, but as one of them, like he kind of prophesized earlier in the season. Daenerys then burns one of the ships, and ordinarily I'd complain that it's strange the other ships didn't aim at the dragons and fire, seeing as they're in a stationary position, but then it occurred to me that the ships, should they miss, would be firing at their own ships, and that would be stupid. This destruction was a visual feast, and I had a lot of excitement for the resolution of this battle. It served Daenerys' character really well too, showing that as a leader she is willing to fight alongside her people, unlike the lazy slavers who sit around all day waiting for the next goblet of wine to be served to them. Although I liked what they did with Grey Worm slicing the two more cowardly slavers' throats, I would have preferred to watch them fight each other on the ground until only one was left, showing the true colours of these men, but they're not exactly well-established characters aside from their wealth and lust for slaves. Then all of a sudden the Greyjoys are here. I felt rather unsettled by the decision not to show them actually arriving, but it was a very small scene, so it doesn't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. The information of who they are and what's to come gets passed on, and predictably Daenerys accepts the Greyjoys' terms. We have some pre-battle chit-chat where Lord Umber once again produces the head of the so-called direwolf to prove that Rickon is in Winterfell. I'm really disappointed nothing was made of that character aside from introducing Rickon back to the story, especially as he had that great scene earlier on in the series. Despite all bets were placed that he was going to turn around and betray the Boltons, turns out he did actually want the Starks dead. In fact, the show was pretty much banking on us thinking this throughout the episode. I barely saw the Karstark character do any fighting, and the conflict between Umber and Tormund Giantsbane was certainly made more apparent throughout the battle, as if his character was going to be remembered for something, but wasn't. I would say this played well on the expectations of the audience, but it just seems a little disappointing at the end of the day. Maybe I shouldn't put that much thought or faith into fan theories anymore. I was quite irritated with Sansa's reaction once the battle plan had been established. Jon is pretty much accused of not knowing his enemy well enough and acts as if she had no ability to speak up at any point during that discussion. What was the point in all that character development to make her a stronger woman if she can't even speak up during a discussion? I highly doubt anybody would object to that. Yeah, but you see, under patriarchy, women are marginalised and silenced, and I thought this was a good representation of woman as an object in this scene as she stood up to Jon like a strong independent woman should. God, I haven't heard much from you two in a while. If Sansa had such a big problem with the plan, why didn't she say something earlier? I don't know about that, but... And why couldn't she come up with any ideas of how to change the plan after she had her outbursts?
I don't know anything about battles, just...
Oh yeah, that's right, she had nothing to contribute. Had she been written more like a human being, I wouldn't have such a problem with this. She then goes on to ramble on about how left out she felt, despite nobody did anything to stop her in any way, before we have an amusing little moment between Tormund and Davos.
Happy shitting.
We then had a really pointless scene with Melisandre. I've been wondering where on earth she's been all this while, and she was just sitting around? I'm in full agreement with Alt-Shift-X's comment about Jon's resurrection serving no purpose since whatever episode it was when he discussed it. I'll link it in the description. He pointed out really well that Jon is still Jon and the characters are treating him like nothing has changed since his resurrection. It's not only a wasted opportunity for the show, but also makes this scene completely pointless, seeing as Jon didn't need reviving after all, considering what's happened in the show since. The best part before the battle really was where Davos finds out what Mel and Stannis were up to before the first battle of Winterfell. His mind must have been so convinced that little Shireen had died because of the battle, and then he picks up that little stag and everything changes. All that while that Davos was so confused whether or not Melisandre was a blessing or a curse for him, and now he's certain of what needs to happen. This desire for revenge and the hatred he has towards her is exemplified in this shot here, where his coat flapping and the morning sun in the background is absolutely gorgeous. God knows whether he's gonna assert some affirmative action next week or not, but I can't wait to see what happens with him now that this revelation has been made. I tell you what, I really like the whole archery segment with Rickon. The opening shots of the scene focus a lot on the archers of the Boltons, almost showing us the horror that's to come. That horrible low droney sound works so fucking well at creating this dreaded atmosphere, and it kept rising until he cut the ropes from Rickon. I knew from a mile away that this wouldn't be the end of the matter, but this sequence was so intense and must have been truly horrible for Jon to feel that his attempted rescue was ultimately pointless. I didn't care much for Rickon and didn't really care much for his death, but I've heard arguments that Rickon should have just zigzagged across the field. Now, why on earth would a child who's scared out of their wits and knows that a straight line is the quickest path do that? I mean, come on, it's not like the kid knew what Ramsay had planned for him. His initial arrow to the chest wasn't what made me that emotional, it was the array of arrows that came after it, reminding us of all those innocent people in this story that died too, and that this quarrel over a castle led to so many dead. I think the music works so well throughout this entire section too, it's absolutely fantastic. This slow motion shot of the drums and the horses charging felt very Lord of the Rings, and it worked very well, probably serving as homage to that fantasy series that is just as successful as this relatively newer one. Jon gets caught off his horse in a beautifully dramatic climax of the enemy charging before him with nothing but a sword, and then the fight begins. Holy fucking shit, it was magnificent. It became clear to me that things were looking up for Team Jon when we saw that Barry would happily fire on his own army for the sake of winning, knowing he had the numbers. There was this fantastic take of Jon standing in the middle of the fight that seemed to be going on for so long. Of course, this was not all one take, it adopted a lot of techniques that were used in Alejandro Iñárritu's 2014 film Birdman, where things would fly across the screen or move into a blackout, allowing for a cut to take place without any disconnection of continuity. It works so well in this sequence because it's not often in TV or film that all of this havoc would be shown in the midst of a main character being stuck in the centre of a battle. It's absolutely brilliant. The sound design was really effective here too. The deep thuds of the horses flying down to the ground right past the camera made me mentally ouch, if anybody knows what that means. It was an absolutely convenient miracle that none of the main fighters were taken out by all those arrows. Very lucky misses indeed. Something I thought was very interesting though was the attention to the huge amounts of bodies this fight created. Normally the bodies are spread out far and wide across the battlefield, but this fight really made an effort to remind us that the bodies would probably end up like that if they all met in the middle. The big wide shots where multiple mountains of human, earth and horse meet and create this horrific sight across an ordinarily empty field are awesome. This idea was made to its full advantage as we see Jon and other characters being near enough suffocated under the piles of corpses, and then that beautiful wall of spears and shields that appeared just lifted the tension to an even bigger height as the music began to play disjointed chords that made me feel really uncomfortable whilst watching this. The Knights of the Vale then arrive, and thank God they did. Everything did look as hopeless as always, but not today. And one's death was really sad. Ramsay literally had his last moment of triumph, defeating the biggest bloke on the enemy's side, almost demonstrating the huge reputation the Boltons once had that was destroyed by one foul member who played the game like a rabid dog instead of a human being. I certainly think his death was most appropriate, as I'm sure everyone else did. I guess now the only ratbags left to kill are the Night's King and Walder Frey, unless you can think of anyone else. If so, leave them in the comments. So, did it suck? This episode was bloody brilliant. I really can't tell if I enjoyed this one more than The Door. Both were excellent in their own ways. This one was an example of class battles and cinematography, but The Door was an example of exceptional writing. I really can't wait for the fun Yes, there's going to be lots of fun next week, guys. I really can't wait for the finale next week. See you all then. This has probably already been a minute. We have some brie, like the cheese. Jon is pretty much accused of not knowing his enemy well enough and acts as if she has no ability to pick up what? I'm in full agreement with Alt-Shift-X's comment about Jon's resurrection serving no purpose since whatever episode it was he went and that was really shit. The best part before the battle really was where Davos finds out what The opening shots of the scene focus a lot on the characters of the Boltons, no, the archers of the Boltons, you nitwit. Now why on earth would a child who's scared of their wits... Who's scared of their wits? That was like an orgasm. It became, and Wun-Wun's death was really sad. Rumsey. His mind must have been so convinced that little Shireen had died because of the battle, and then he picks up that little horse and everything changes.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go on.
Was it a horse or was it a stag?
Oh, it might have been a stag, actually. It was, because it had the horse, Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. Good point, because otherwise... Oh, no one ever points out any of my errors in my episodes anyway, but I'll change it. Yeah.